Yes, there we go. So if I go to Save As in my Word document, we can see over here all of our drives again. We're going to click on the transcript drive. The next thing that we need to do is choose the court that we're in. Now, we know from our matter spreadsheet that we are in the county court, and we know that it's a criminal matter. So we're going to go to county court, and here we can see we have criminal, and then it would be a matter of going into the initial of the matter name. Now, this is how we would generally do it. I'm actually going to jump into our archive just because this is an old matter. And the name of this case, as we can see, is Matter and Anor. Usually that means we'd be saving into M. As luck would have it, whichever TC set this up made a little mistake, and so it's actually in T, but that doesn't matter much for now. So we jump in, we can see it's DPP against Taylor. And then if there was any confusion, we can see that in the pathway, it's actually got the EPIC number as well. So 17-1415, which matches up with the EPIC number on our spreadsheet. And we can also see that it's Judge Patrick, so we know we're in the right matter. At this point, we're going to click into the typed folder, and here you can see all of the days where this has been typed. Now, we know that we're on day 1 because in our matter we can see, well, this is the training tab, but it's day 1. I'm going to go in there, and it's in the AM. We're typing cut K, which is in the morning, but every cut that happens before lunchtime is all classed as the AM. So for example, on our spreadsheet, you can see down here that cuts, well, S onwards are all actually after midday, but we class them all as AM cuts because they occur before lunch. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, perfect. So we know because it's occurred before lunch, cut K, we're going to jump into AM, and this is where we would save our cuts. Now, I've set up a training folder for us, so I'm going to save it in there. Now we need to know, how do we name our cuts? So if we come back to our spreadsheet, we can see that the TC has actually told us save as. So we know that we're going to save it as M-A-T-T. This is almost always the first 4 letters of the case name. So we can see Matter and Anor, it's going to be M-A-T-T. So M-A-T-T. We know that it's day 1, so I'm going to do a 1. And then we know that it's cut K, so I'm going to do a K. And we're going to save it like that. So just to recap, in terms of saving your cuts, you look on the spreadsheet to see what name they want you to save it under, M-A-T-T. Then we put in the number day, so we're on day 1, and then we put in the cut letter, cut K, and we go save. Any questions on that from anyone?
Yes, I'm assuming that you have all those in your Windows Explorer because you're there locally, but is that going to be different for us who are remote?
So I think it will be slightly different to you. We have a TC in office who used to be an at-home typist, and that's potentially something we can get her to speak to you on further as the week goes on. In terms of where you save all the things, it's my understanding that it's more or less the same process as in the office. It may potentially involve dragging your cuts from your local server over into ours, but as you go on, that's something that you'll understand a lot better as you're fully set up. So I'm sorry that I can't give you very detailed information about that at the moment, but in terms of the naming conventions when we're saving things and where to save them, that should all be exactly the same. It's just how that will look on your computer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Perfect. So that's how we start a cut. We make sure that we have a footer up the top. We immediately save to the appropriate folder on the T drive, and then we're more or less ready to type. There is something else that makes our life a lot easier, though, as a typist, and that is autocorrect. Now, forgive me if this is something you already know all about, but in Microsoft Word, we have this little lightning bolt icon, the autocorrect. Now, if you don't have that on your Microsoft Word just yet, that's okay. We can set that up for you if you don't already know how to do that. But I'm just going to show you the very basics. As typists, as you can imagine, when we're typing, we have a lot of the same people speaking time and time again. So the judge, for example, is going to be speaking a lot. And just to give you some idea, if I go to the cut K that's already been typed, having a look at this, you can see in the margin, Her Honour's speaking, then Mr. Grant's speaking, then Her Honour's speaking, then Mr. Pappas. It would be the most irritating thing in the world to have to type out Her Honour, Mr. Grant, and Mr. Pappas every single time it happens. So we used autocorrect for that. What we would do is we would jump into autocorrect, and for His or Her Honour, we would do HH, and then in caps, we would type His Honour, colon, and do one space. And then when we come into our document later and type HH space, His Honour appears in the margin. The reason that we do the one space when we're setting it up is because then when we go HH space, we've got the two spaces between the colon and whatever we're going to write. Something we're going to learn a little later is that we always do two spaces after a colon or a full stop. So it just means we're ready to go and it's going to speed us up. Likewise in autocorrect, for counsel or the barristers, say I wanted to put in Mr. Pappas, I would put in MMPP. That means MM for Mr. and PP for Pappas. I would type colon and the one space. Okay. And now if I jump in here, I go MMPP space, Mr. Pappas is ready to go. Now the reason that I've done the MM and the PP is it's very unlikely that I'm going to be spelling a word in the process of typing that has a double M and a double P after it. So it means by doing it this way that I won't end up with any random Mr. Pappases in the middle of a sentence in a transcript. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yep, perfect. Amazing.
Can I ask,
Oh, yes, please.
if I'm used to using auto text rather than autocorrect for that, because I have been doing court work for about 10 years and I've always used auto text, would that be a problem if I continued doing it the way I do all the time for His Honour or Her Honour and all that? Like, I have a lot of them already on my computer, of course. Is that an issue to keep doing it that way?
I don't think so. I would be very surprised if it were. What I'll do is I'll double check with our TCs this afternoon just in case it impacts the merge, but I would be very surprised if it would. I think you would be okay to just continue to do that.
Right.
And I have to apologise as well because particularly if you've been typing for that long, a lot of the stuff today will be
it's
very
wonderful.
basic.
I did my training over 10 years ago, so it's wonderful to hear it all again anyway, even if I have to know some of it, so I'm more than happy.
Oh, perfect. Well, that works out very well.
Yep.
But yeah, that's a really great question, and I'll make sure to follow up on that for you just to double check.
Thanks.
No worries. So now that we're ready to go, we have all of the resources open that we need in Chrome. We have our footer, we have saved our document, we have our autocorrect set up. The next thing that we would do is obviously type the cut, and we're going to go into that a lot more later, but say we've typed everything that we need to type over here. Or actually what I might do is say the day started off with His Honour saying, as it does in the transcript, yes, thank you. Next thing that we would do is copy that. And this is actually more relevant for people typing any cut that isn't the first cut of the day. So I'm going to pretend I'm Tima, another lady in the office down here. Say that I'm actually typing cut L. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a note and put my first words into that cell. The reason for that is when Katie finishes her cut K, she's going to make sure that her final words match up with the first words that Tima has written in her cut. Now, you can see that that's going to be a fairly easy process because every cut, every subsequent cut has about a 5-second overlap. So you can see 10:39:55 to 10:50 is cut K, but then cut L actually starts at 10:49:55, i.e. the last 5 seconds of cut K. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So it's just really important for us. I mean, the first cut of the day, you don't need to put in your first words because no one needs to link up with it. But for all of the subsequent cuts, it's really important to put in just the first few words, and then the person above you is going to make sure that their final words exactly match whatever you have put in here. And the reason for that is when the merge occurs to stitch all of the cuts together, it's just really important for all of those overlaps to be the same so it doesn't muck up the merge. All right. And so once we've done that, we can type the rest of our cut. So la la la, we get to the end of the cut. And now I'm going to show you how we would finish it. Now, it's really simple. It involves going to, so say we've gotten to 10:50. I'm going to come up here to the transcript tab. And I'm going to come over here to the end of tape icon. Now you can see immediately it inserts end of tape in brackets and in caps on the cut. But the other thing that it does is it immediately brings up a spell check. So I can see that it's asking me to spell check there the footer, so I'm just going to skip that, and that's all my gibberish, so I'm going to skip that as well. Now, if you for some reason forgot where the end of tape icon was, you could literally just type out end of tape, but then you would have to remind yourself to do a spell check. So it's a really good habit to get into just using the end of tape macro, and that's going to bring up that spell check automatically. The end of tape must be there for the purposes of the merge, otherwise we make it very difficult for the TCs. Does that all make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yep. So obviously we need to make sure we do a spell check at the end of every cut. We need to make sure that our crossover all works out with the next typist. So say Tina here now has gotten to the end of her cut, and say Dimitri has started the next one. And Dimitri's put in some words for his first words down here. As Tima, I'd just be double checking that my final words matched up with Dimitri's. The other thing that we need to do when we finish a cut is reflect that on the spreadsheet. So say I was typing cut K and I finish it off. I'm going to come over here and replace my initials on this side just with yes. And that just means that all of the typists know that I've finished that cut. Now, say for some reason I did 2 cuts in a row. This doesn't generally happen in courts because usually we go 1 cut at a time. But say, for example, I came off a short adjournment and my cut O was only 2 minutes. So I finished it super speedily, and then I took cut P as well, and that was all cool with the other typists. After I finished cut O, I'd type yes, and then I'd probably type all of cut P in the same document as cut O. That means that then when I get to the end of P, I'm going to type yes in O. And that just means that when the TC is going to merge the document, they know that cut P isn't missing, it's just found in cut O. Beautiful. Alrighty. So as I said, generally we take 1 cut at a time, especially in the courts. It can be a little bit different with the delayed work, where the TCs might ask you to take several cuts at a time. And I've often found as well that there's a bit of an etiquette for taking cuts, especially with at-home typists, who of course get paid for the number of words that they produce. So for example, if we come on to, I'm just going to jump into the county court tab in the transcript schedule. You can see that for this matter that ran today, we had 3 typists allocated. Generally speaking, if Janelle is at the top, Gwen is in the centre and Kerith is third, Janelle will take the first, Gwen will take the second, and Kerith will take the third. Of course, you can spark each other if you are ready to go and someone else is still getting a cup of tea in the morning or something like that. But I found as a general rule of thumb, that's how it tends to operate, especially for the at-home typists. Okay, so that's pretty much everything that we need to know at this stage about setting up, saving and ending a cut. Does anyone have any questions on that at this stage?
No.
was just wondering, those
Yeah.
words at the start of each term that you copied in,
Yes.
where did you, I kind of missed exactly where you pasted those.
Oh, no worries.
Into
I'll
that.
just show you now.
Sorry.
So, no, that's perfect. So as we said, we copied them just out of Word, and then we came back into our Matter spreadsheet. And sorry, I stupidly took this out, but say this was TB's cut, Tina's cut. You would highlight that cell, so the one on the left-hand side of her segment of time. She would right-hand click on the mouse, come up to Insert Note, and then she would paste it straight in here.
Okay.
The other thing is, don't be stressed if your cut starts halfway through someone's sentence. You just type whatever is at the start of your cut. Sometimes you might have to scroll back a little bit to make sure that what you're typing is making sense. But you just type from the start of your cut, and that's absolutely fine. So say, for example, the start of your cut was his honour halfway through his sentence just saying thank you. You would just put in thank you and say that he kept speaking. I would probably highlight all of this, copy it, and then paste it into first words. Because something like thank you comes up so frequently, that's why I'd put the first few words after that as well. But takeaway message, don't be stressed if your first words are halfway through someone's sentence. Does that explain that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Now I can see that it's almost 2:30, so I'm just revising as we go here. Would you prefer to watch basic discussion and follow along with the document that I sent you, or jump straight into typing a cut? What works best for everybody? Sounds like maybe no firm preferences. The reason I ask is that I would just hate for you all to be sitting there thinking, I just want to type, I just want to type. I personally think it is worthwhile to read through the transcript. But if you're happy to do that, we might just take 15 minutes now. Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd like to read through, yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I was the same when I started. I wanted to see what it looked like. And this will also help us just get acquainted a bit more with FTR as well. So if you want to just open up the transcript document that I sent you this morning, it should be cut K of the Georgina matter. Give you a second to do that while I get myself sorted. Just let me know when you have that document open.
I've got mine open.
Yeah, fine.
Awesome. Was that 3 for 3? Yeah, wonderful. Okay. Now, do each of you have FTR on your computer at this stage with access to the footage? I'm going to guess not.
I have
have it.
FTR, but I don't have any footage.
Okay. Yeah, no worries.
Yes, I'm the same. I haven't downloaded the footage.
Okay, no problems. What we might do in that case is, I think it should be possible for you to watch the footage from my screen, and you can follow along on your own computers on the transcript. So we might just try that out now, because I just want to make sure that you can see clearly enough for it to be worthwhile. I'm just going to try and get that footage up for you. Now, the footage that we're using are the ones, is the matter that we saw where to access before. I might try and make this a little bigger. Can you see that picture relatively well?
Yep.
Yep.
Now I'm going to try and turn up the volume. Can you hear that, or is it too terribly faint?
I'm finding there's a lot of interference in the audio this afternoon that wasn't there this morning.
Oh, okay.
So it might, like you occasionally get drowned out by it. I'm finding it quite loud. I'm not sure what it is this afternoon.
Oh, goodness. I am also not sure, but I'm so sorry about that because it must be very irritating. Let me just have a look at Blue Jeans quickly just to see if there's anything that strikes me as different. No, not really.
That's okay.
I'm so sorry about that.
Fine. That's fine.
How about we watch a couple of minutes and you can tell me if it's a worthwhile exercise or not? Because if you can't hear it all, we may just be better to describe what's happening in the footage quickly and then just look through the transcript together. And then when you all have access to the drive, hopefully it'll be a lot easier and a lot clearer. Does that sound okay?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm just going to start. Just let me wind back very slightly. Right, it's very strange without my pedal. Okay. Just for those of you who haven't had much exposure to a courtroom, we can see up the top in this screen that I'm just highlighting with my mouse what we call the bar table. At the bar table, all of the lawyers are assembled. So you can see the ones with the little white things over here are the barristers, and then generally directly facing them will be the solicitors working with them. In the back, the dock, that's where the accused man and woman are seated. If we come down here to the bottom left-hand side of the screen, this is where the judge will come in and sit down. And then as we mentioned this morning, over in the right bottom hand side, we can see where witnesses would take a seat, just to orient you a little bit. Now I'm just going to start the footage and you can see that Her Honour is about to come in, bows, and she takes a seat. The little mumble that you could hear in the background, you would usually be able to hear a lot better. And that is the tip staff, one of the members of the staff of the courtroom who we'll learn a bit more about, calling the matter. That is saying, this is the case of the Director of Public Prosecutions against, and so on and so forth. After the judge has sat down and after the matter has been called, generally that's when we start typing. Start playing again.
Very much, Ms. O'Brien. Thank you, Mr. Grant. Now, but I did have a look at this. I have a general idea, but also in gaining the general idea, I thought there wasn't too much point in getting over into detail, but just to let you all know that I'm not really. Tell me what's going on. Yes, okay.
I'm just going to briefly pause to check in. Can you hear anything at all of the footage?
Just sort of getting every second or third word.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting every fourth or fifth word.
Okay. Yeah. Well, if you agree, I think there's probably not a lot of point in us watching the full 9 minutes, because I think it's just going to be frustrating more than anything. What we might do is together have a look at the transcript, because we've described where everybody is seated in the courtroom. So I might just give you a little bit of a rundown of the sort of thing that is going on at this point, and we might just note some things in the transcript together that can then be a jumping off point for us maybe having a little bit of a type this afternoon. So if you have that document in front of you, you can see that right up the top, do you have the copyright on your document? Maybe? No, you don't.
I have no
That's
idea.
okay. Yep, that's fine. I answered my own question, you don't. So you just start off with the footer and then Her Honour, yes, thank you, good morning, Mr. Grant. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So what we were just looking at then in FTR is the start of a criminal trial. And really what it is that has been typed in this cut K is what we call discussion. Now, legal discussion, there is I believe in the manual there is a definition. Legal discussion is basically any discussion that occurs between the lawyers and the judge, so between counsel and the judge. A lot of the time, discussion might be about a particular legal principle, for example. So it'll happen when there's no jury in the room and no witnesses. But sometimes discussion can also be about administrative things. Discussion can be about, for example, how the day is going to run. And you'll find as we go on and we learn more and more about the procedures in the courtroom, the discussion will often occur at the start of the day as they sort of come to grips with what's going on in the case. And then throughout the day, a lot of the time you'll have discussion between the judge and the lawyers in the absence of the jury and of witnesses. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Now, discussion is pretty easy to type because we more or less just type what we hear. You can see as you come down cut K that on the left-hand side of the page, we have the Her Honour, Mr. Grant, Mr. Pappas, Miss O'Brien, etc. We generally call these our margin designations. And pretty much in everything you type, you will be using this to specify who it is that's speaking. Something else that you will notice is that point that we were talking about before, which is the two spaces in between colons and full stops and whatever comes next. And little look as we go down the page. I was just having a look. So this is for a drug case, I believe. And this discussion, we can see up the top that Her Honour says, yes, thank you, good morning. And what follows is the official appearances for the day. And what that means is the lawyers just introduce who they are. And then from there, all of the discussion follows on. If you've had a little bit of a flick through, you'll see that they're just talking about what's been going on in the matter. They're talking about different people involved in it. They're talking about the different charges that have been laid down. And then as we come to the end of the cut, we can see that there's some other administrative matters as well about whether or not the accused person can have an iPad in the dock, things like that. So these are all things that are often included in discussion, administrative and legal. Now, just having a look at the transcript, is there anything that strikes anyone, for example? Like, do you see any formatting in there or any words in there or anything that you'd like to know a little bit more about? Anything that you notice that might seem strange to you?
No, but I'm wondering what we do if we can't make out a word.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a fantastic question. Again, we'll go over these things as we go on throughout the week. But if we can't make out a word, we use indistinct. So if I come to the top of the page, say, for example, Her Honour said, yes, thank you, good morning, and then I couldn't hear what came next. Instead of Mr. Grant, I would type indistinct if I thought it was one word, or if I thought it was two indistinct words, close brackets and full stop. So if you have a look in your, a bit later, in the manual that I sent you via email, there's a section in there on indistinct, and you'll learn in there that in a case-sensitive way as well. So, for example, if the indistinct was actually at the start of this sentence, so it was, you know, morning, had no idea what came before morning, you would type with capital I. There we go. Wonderful. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
No worries. Anything anybody else has noticed? I can bring up these dashes, for example. Now, if you've done any typing work in the past, it's possible that these are not new to you. But the 3 dashes is something that we use when somebody is interrupted. So, for example, here we can see that Her Honour's been speaking, and then towards the end of the question, Mr. Grant's decided he's just going to butt right in. 3 dashes at the end of Her Honour's speaking, and then Mr. Grant said something, and Her Honour's responded to what he said. But if, for example, Her Honour had, as happens down here, been cut off again, but then continues on with what she was saying, we would also do 3 dashes back in to specify the fact that she had been interrupted, but what follows is exactly following on from what she had been saying before she was interrupted. Any questions on that?
No.
No, easy peasy, fantastic. Yeah.
I just have one.
Yes.
Is it just because maybe, well, I don't know why, with the hard spaces in the dashes, you've got them at the end, but I notice at the beginning when they continue, you haven't got the hard spaces. Is that actually how it's meant to be, or is that just the way this person has typed this turn?
That's a great question. So just to make sure that I understand the question, so you mean here where we have the dashes and then not more dashes back in? Was that it?
And yes, and the ones at the end all have the, a hard controlled space.
Yes.
But at the beginning where Her Honour starts speaking again, they're just dashes with normal spaces. Is that specifically meant to be that way?
Yeah, so actually what happens is at the end of our cut, when we use the end of tape macro that we were looking at before, generally it will insert the little hard spaces. So I think a lot of the time other typists refer to them as stickies.
Okay, sure.
So generally that will be a matter of the computer sort of formatting that for us.
Okay.
So as typists, we don't need to worry very much. We just need to make sure that we're doing the 3 dashes. We haven't dashed back in here at line 15 because what she's saying isn't following on from the thought she'd been having up there.
Yeah, no.
Interrupted, and then she responds to the interruption. But as you say down here, she's interrupted, and then she continues with her thought after the interruption. So we've dashed back in, and as you can see here, yes, for some reason the hard spaces.
And I wondered if that was like deliberately done that way. That was all. But no.
Yeah, great question. The answer is no. Ideally, it would be hard as well, but for whatever reason,
okay, no worries.
Yeah, it hasn't.
Sure.
No problems. You can see as well, clicking through, we've got lots of numbers that have been used. In the VGRS manual, there are very specific rules surrounding when to use numerals and when to use words. Just to give you a very, very brief introduction to that, just so you can do some typing later and have a bit of an idea, VGRS prefers the numbers 0 to 10 to be in words, and 11 upwards to be in numerals. That being said, there are several exceptions. So if we come down here to is this still page 1, at line 28, we can see charges 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. The reason for that is that the numbers are attached to charge, and so we do it in numerals. So if you want to have a look at the ins and outs of those rules, feel free to have a look in the VGRS manual. But a general rule of thumb is that, yes, 0 to 10 is in words and 11 and above is in numerals. That's just something else that I'd flag, just having a look through. The other thing that I would also mention to you is you can see that this transcript looks quite clean. And by that, I mean, we can't see any ums and ahs in there. No utterances like or ouch or whatever the case may be. Now, for some of you who have some experience in typing, this may be no new thing. But as a general rule of thumb, when we're typing discussion between the judge and counsel, we clean up their speech a little bit. That doesn't mean necessarily we change what they say, but we don't type it verbatim. That means that we don't type ums, ahs, hms, mm-hms, any of those sort of non-verbal sounds, or ums. The other thing that we do generally for counsel and for the judge is we turn yeahs into yeses. So when we were very briefly listening to the footage just before, you might have heard Her Honour or counsel say, for example, yes. So Her Honour could have started off the day by saying, yeah, thank you. We're going to type that as yes, thank you, just to ensure a professional looking script. Again, that's in the manual, but that's just something to flag with you for a start while we're looking at this example. Are there any questions on that?
No.
Nope. Oh, fantastic, amazing. Another thing that I would say on numerals is if you have a number at the start of a sentence, no matter what number it is, generally you will transcribe it as a word, not as the numeral. There are a couple of exceptions, again, in the manual as relate to, for example, addresses, dates, monetary amounts. But in general, if your number appears at the start of the sentence, you'll be transcribing as a word, not a numeral. And that's just something I've noticed here. So it occurred to me to raise it. Now, I'm very aware of the time. What I'd really like to do now is together set up a cut for another matter. But I'm just thinking, if you don't have access to the footage at this stage, it may not be possible for us to do any typing this afternoon. Sorry, let me just think for a second. I'm just going to have a little look at my schedule here and just see if there's anything else that we can run through now in terms of information. Because hopefully everybody will be set up to the point where they can access their own footage ASAP, because I would hate to have you here having to listen to me speak about it for the next few days and not being able to do, because I certainly find that's how I learn best. So I'm just having a look to see if there's anything we've missed. Something I might just raise as well from the cut that we've just been looking at, if I just scroll down a little more, I wouldn't mind just saying something briefly on abbreviations, because that's another good one to just have in mind as you're reading through this cut. Oh, and it doesn't have any. Okay, that doesn't occur in this cut, so I might not do that. I might leave that for another time. Okay.